Hello, hello, everybody. A lot of familiar faces, names. Welcome all to the first time that Spencer and I are working together specifically with the Enneagram, although we did teach a class when he was 10 years old, but I don't know if that counts. He did, for real. And he also did a class in junior high and then again in high school, one on the instincts and one on the Enneagram types, right, Spence?
That is true, actually. I forgot about that, but that's totally true.
I'm just so happy to welcome you all here and have Spencer here, who's grown up knowing nothing other than the Enneagram. Now, mind you, in 1985, there weren't books yet, and I was working from notes and charts, the first 5 charts that had Echazo's terminology that had been disseminated through Naranjo. And actually, the person to attribute that to is Kathy Spieth, his girlfriend, that she actually put the information in a handout for her classes that she taught later on in the late 70s, mid to late 70s. So here we are. And for those of you who don't know me, my name is Katherine Fauvre. I've worked with the Enneagram since 1985 and have studied with everyone you can imagine. I've certified with Helen Palmer and David Daniels, with Don Riso and Rusty Hudson, Ted Donson and Kathy Hurley. And I also had the benefit of being able to spend a full week and do an intensive with Naranjo and with Echazo. And I've done 22 different research studies. And in those studies, I happened to attend Naranjo's course like a year after my first study had been completed. And he validated my work with the subtypes, which was his domain. He created that part of the Enneagram. So that's my background. And I coach and train and do everything you can do with the Enneagram. I work in businesses. I work one-on-one. Spencer.
Hi. My name is Spencer Chernick. I have been working with the Enneagram arguably just as long because it all started when I was in the womb. A lot of my training comes from someone you may or may not know. Her name is Katherine Fauvre. And so I kind of grew up with this. I tried typing all my friends from a very young age. And I've found it incredibly useful throughout my life. I got a master's in psychology. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. And while in grad school, I even did my thesis on personality type and a correlation with that, an approach to conflict. And I used Enneagram as my personality typing module. Yeah, just happy to be here. I feel like I've been doing this forever, and I love learning more and more because there's always more to learn.
Always, always. Thank you, Spence. All right. So I've been asked to always read about the type for people who don't understand it as well. And I want you to know that on my Enneagram site, which is katherinefauvre.com, I have this collage for the 8s. And this collage is meaningful because all the image, sorry.
I was wondering.
Hey, I want you to look at these types in a new way. So you'll find it there. All you have to do is go to katherinefauvre.com, click on types, and for every type, the collage is there, as well as the description of the type as it emerged, and exemplars and Pinterest exemplars. And Pinterest is more accurate than the list. I inadvertently found out recently that the list was from long ago and somehow got merged in with my current one. And so it's being corrected right now. And I have changed some people. But every collage is meaningful because it came from the types themselves. and there's one for every type, and there's a story behind each picture that was sent in and what the person said when they sent the picture, but also what the other 9 types said about the collage. And the way I ran that first or second research was to have people identify what they related to, what they didn't relate to, and why. And it was really pretty easy to then see if they were mistyped because they didn't relate to their collage, but would end up relating to another collage. But if you know the archetypal imagery and why it was sent, it gives a lot more understanding. And I do have that class as well. But in the case of the Enneagram types, if you want a quick summary, when you take the test, whatever types you come out, you can click on a link where it says downloads, and you can just get what I've learned over 35 years is held up to be true all the time, not just part of the time. So things that were misassigned to a type have been dropped out and put where they belong. In the original dissemination of the Enneagram, the first people that taught it didn't have the full information. Naranjo did, but he didn't teach everything that he learned. And he only had a year's worth of training under Echazo. And he brought so much to the Enneagram that in a way they became 2 separate disseminations. And Echazo later added Trifix, and Naranjo later added Subtypes, and I've just put them back together again. And I found what both of them did separate from having learned from them or studied it, because remember, I started out so early. But the 8 is commonly called the powerful person, the protector, the leader, the negotiator, the boss, the challenger. But most importantly, they want to be known as the protective person that's in charge. So the summary description is that 8s believe that the world can be a hard and unjust place where only the strong survive. They have a personal code of honor and focus on strength and justice. This is really important because it's not the same as the 1's standards, but because they're both in the gut center dealing with extremes, right, wrong, good, bad, there's still a way that they evaluate and assess what they should do. And both are just versions of 9 anyhow. And the 9's trying to hold the balance of both. So when the 8 has a code of honor, it's like, yeah, these are my rules, not society's rules, not anyone else's rules. And I won't go against my own code. And it's important to differentiate that because every 8 has a code of honor. You just may not know what is on that code. But it's usually to protect the vulnerable, the disenfranchised, the underdog, and those that are misrepresented or accused of things they haven't done or being misled in some way. It's just intuitive for the 8s to come in and say something. Now, to gain respect, which is critical to 8s, and to assure protection from injustices, which every 8 felt when they were young, they assert themselves and in the process may at times be seen as overbearing. Now, interestingly enough, it's really the 2 that is more consistently overbearing, but the 8 can have such a strong opinion and seem so inflexible because of delivery. They deliver it directly that people don't realize that an 8 will change their mind if you give them a good argument, because the 8 is focused on having the power. And if they're defending a weak position, they don't want to continue to do so. So they are adept at seeing the big picture and sensing what motivates people. This is another reason why eights can type so quickly. They can learn the system really fast. Maybe not all the individual variables, but they're already doing that from the time they're born. They're noticing, wait a minute, that person says they're happy, but that isn't a happy face. And what, not unlike the six, what's that person up to? But the six assigns a ulterior motive. The eight, on the other hand, is saying, yeah, what's the motive? It's not necessarily an ulterior motive, but there is a motive for everybody doing everything in the eight's mind. Eights dislike falseness. They get in trouble that way because they want to expose insincerity, expose deceit. And that doesn't go well because a lot of people have deception as a means of a defense strategy. So eights have to learn that they can be aware, but if it's not hurting anybody, it's in their best interest to not try to expose it. And they also really feel very uncomfortable and push on in people that are indecisive because they want to know, is it yes or is it no? Don't give me explanations, just answer it yes or no. Because remember, they're in the gut center and they're not the nine. And both 1 and 8 want the yes or no because then they know how to listen from that point forward. And they're attracted to truth and injustice and want to be the bearers of justice. And the high side of 8 is that they do fight for people that in ways that it won't even benefit them because it's a core value. But they also have to learn that their truth is not the truth. And truth is a slippery customer. What's true today might not be true tomorrow. So overall, those are the general principles to begin with. But I want to move into the material by talking about how Spencer and I work with eights. I want you to tell me a couple scenarios where you used 8 in your life as a kid and how it was an advantage, what people liked about it, what you liked about it, and then times when it was problematic or other people found it problematic. And then we'll go into.
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, I think you said it really well. Eights really want to fight for the underdog. Unfair treatment, that's a really big button for me. And so I'll admit this instance answers both of your questions because it was, depending on who you talk to, it was appreciated or it was something that was considered troublesome. Because I don't double check whether or not I should be doing it because, as you mentioned earlier, it goes against my own code of honor. I know right away if something's not okay because I feel it. It's not a thing I have to checklist. So as a kid, I remember feeling like a kid was like, there was this girl that was next to me and she was going through a really hard time. And I knew that, I don't remember why, but I knew that. So I wanted to help her feel better. So I was like passing her notes in class, just being like, hey, you got this. Like, if you need anything, let me know. Like, just trying to really support her. And this teacher was always waiting for me to do something wrong because, I mean, let's just be honest, I was always doing something I probably shouldn't have been. So she had a reason to be looking at me. And so here I am passing notes. And then so she grabs the note and she's like, oh, maybe everyone should read this. And all cocky, I just lean back and I'm like, yeah, go ahead, read it. Because I knew it was going to make me look really good because I'm just being really kind and sweet to someone, you know? So she...
Oh, Spence, how old were you?
Well, this has happened a couple times, I'll be honest. But in this specific instance, this was like freshman year of high school.
Okay.
Yeah. And so, and then she ended up not reading it out loud because that went against what she was hoping to achieve in that moment. So person next to me really appreciated it. Person trying to teach algebra, not so much. So, and then of course there was several instances where friends were being like, every time you move to a new school, you're no longer king of the campus. You're the newcomer, and so older kids would try to stake their claim really quickly, and bully. Let's just be honest. And I didn't take kindly to that and would get in trouble because I would insert myself into the situation and make it so that their attention went towards me instead of my friend. And so that would result in friends appreciating it, but the bully and then later on the yard duty, not so much. So I actually kind of feel like that's just been the kind of constant. It depends on who's observing and who's involved, because my heart's always in the right place, but if it conflicts with a way it's supposed to be done, or whether it should happen at all, that tends to irritate. And for those who understand where my heart is and what I'm trying to do, they really appreciate it.
And 8s have a lot of excess energy compared to other people. And if they're an extrovert, it's even harder to not say, not do. And one thing that I'll also add is that when Spencer was 5, his after school caregiver said, "Can I talk to you a minute about Spencer? He's the nicest kid. He helps people out, but he also kind of tells them what to do." And I said, "Yeah, he does. He thinks that's helping him." And he said, "But he's at that age where he needs to begin to realize that everyone is going to kind of want to do what they think they should do." And I said, "Oh yeah, he's given that guidance all the time, but it takes longer because it comes from a good place. You think you're protecting people." I said, "So just think back to the times when he was telling people what to do. Did he think he was telling them something they should know so they weren't weak or pathetic or seen that way by others?" And he said, "Come to think of it, it's always something like that he was trying to say, yeah, you don't want to say that, or you don't want to do that." Mm-hmm. On the other hand, I had always told him to have emotion because I had an 8 grandmother, an 8 aunt, an 8 father, and they always told me, don't ever show your emotion because then you give people the power to hurt you. But I didn't want my kids growing up that way. So I told him, if you feel something, feel it. We'll talk about it. And by the time he was 5 or 6, kids started saying, "Yeah, why are you showing that you're crying?" And he goes, "Because that's my real feeling." And they said, and then he came home and said, "Mom, I was just showing them my real feeling. Why were they making fun of me?" One kid in particular, actually. And I said, "Well, this is about the age where you have to learn how to cry inside. Just know what you're feeling, but you can't always show it because kids will use, my dad was right after all." And he got mad at me. Do you remember it?
Well, yeah, because you lied to me. At least that's how it felt, I understand you were trying to teach me like an overall message, but there's kind of like a way to carry it. So yeah, I got mad.
He said, "You didn't tell me that."
Yeah, you left out a real crucial part of the story.
But do you know how to go to your feelings now? Come on.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, totally. So I'm obviously very grateful. I'm kind of in the business of feelings now. So it's usually
So that's an important thing with 8s because usually the first time we feel pain and shame or shame as a result of showing our feelings. So let's face it, 8s play louder, cry louder, love harder. Everything we do, it's an excess. So it can be hard to manage if you happen to be a type that is introverted and quiet and you want things predictable. It's not going to be easy to have an 8 child or an 8 student or an 8 person that you're guiding, but especially when they're children. And the most obvious thing that parents and teachers think is they need to put more boundaries on that 8 child. And it's actually just the opposite. Like in my own experience, when I changed schools, well, when I went to school for the first time, which was kindergarten when I was growing up, my brother said, hey, if anybody, tries to hurt you in any way, just slug them. And I said, oh, okay. So I go to school. I'm on the playground. I'm climbing up the slide, and this guy pushes in front of me. And so I elbowed him. And then he kind of had to hold on to the side of the slide, and I went down first. But the way the teacher interpreted that was that I initiated that elbow. But I said, no, he was pushing me. And I was just holding my place. But what I didn't understand was another person's perspective. And then my first little parent-teacher report card said, Kate is a really nice girl, but she tends to hit when she doesn't get her way. And that one incident became my image to that teacher. And that's hard for any type, but for an 8, it's, wait, I was just making it fair, the way it should have been. And it was very confusing to me. My dad said, good for you. He was an 8. My mom said, oh, don't do that. It brings shame to the family. She was a 4. And I then wasn't really sure what I should do. So it's helpful to help the young 8 discover what their code of honor is and to explain the scenarios as they happen for the future as to what is in the best interest of the 8. But another situation was when I was in 2nd grade and I was changing mid-year, like right after Christmas, to a school where everyone already knew how to do everything according to how the teacher wanted it, but I didn't. And I had come from a school where I had learned cursive, I was writing small, but we weren't taught how to tell time, and I did not know how to tell time. So when I go into this new school, there were mimeographs, which is another thing that I never noticed the word mimeograph rather than photocopy, that we were given. And then the teacher at the beginning of the class would say, okay, and then she'd read the first thing we were supposed to do. Jack and Jill went up the hill, blank, whatever, the rest of the sentence. And she said, okay, do y'all have that? And everyone said yes. And I just didn't say anything. I'm looking on that paper for the word blank, blank. I couldn't see it. I didn't know what she meant. And so I was asking the person next to me, where's blank? I don't see the word blank. And she kept saying blank, blank. I didn't know that the underline, because I'd never seen a mimeograph way of working done before. But I didn't ask her. I didn't want to be the only kid saying no. And so every day I just crinkle up my work and throw it away because I didn't know what I was supposed to be doing. And she never spent any time, nor did I ask, by the way. It wasn't until she noticed that my papers weren't being handed in that she checked the trash because it was right at her desk. But instead of saying, oh, why did you do that? I was just disciplined. Because I would have told her, well, I couldn't find the word blank, so I didn't know how to do the work. And that's hard on an 8 child because we're not going to reveal what we don't know. Now, a lot of other kids won't too, especially if they have 8 in the Tritype. But it's important to understand that we may act like we know everything, but we don't. But if we get a good teacher or parent that understands us, we want to do everything to please, everything. And we don't want to have an adversarial relationship. We don't want a power struggle. But if one is started, we won't back down. And that's the problem. A lot of times teachers and parents get into a belief system that the more you assert and deny the 8, you'll get better behavior, but it's just the opposite. The 8 has to co-create the solution. And you have to ask the questions. And it flies in the face of everything that's been written about child rearing to involve the child. But if you tell a child that's an 8, okay, you win this time. Next time I win. But you have to keep your word. I'm keeping my word now, and I'll keep my word in the future. The 8 will feel honor bound to keep their word. Now, what's important when you're the parent of a young child is you give them all kinds of unimportant things and say, you win this time. And when it's important, you go, I win this time. And they'll say, but, and then you just say, you gave your word. If you want me to keep my word in the future, you've got to keep yours. And they will do it. And with respect to discipline, if you say to the 8, what do you think is fair that your punishment is? And you have to distinguish between accidental error and direct disobedience. And you kind of lay out what you think it should be, but then you say, what do you think? The 8 will be much harder on themselves than anything you could think of, because self-vengeance is a real thing. Now, Spencer, having grown up with that, how did you experience it? The deal making.
I mean, like with you mean, or just in general?
Well, I don't know that everybody made deals with you.
No, yeah, that's what I was wondering. Yeah, so I mean, I always really appreciated it. It made me feel like my voice mattered, and also let me know that intentions would be honored. Because the hardest thing for me to understand, I remember when you had to explain to me why I had to still say sorry even when I accidentally hurt another kid. Because my whole thing was, well, I didn't do it on purpose. Why would I say sorry, right? Like I accidentally knocked the kid over. I didn't understand that my intention, though important, wasn't the full picture. And so giving me that framework of being like, well, if someone accidentally knocked you over, would you not want them to apologize? And so that fairness thing really, really worked.
There's more to that story that I know as a parent. It is that kids, you'd be riding the little vehicle and they'd come running in front of you. So you really didn't think that you did it. And
yeah.
That was another factor. And they tried everything with you to get you to say you were sorry, and you wouldn't do it. You said they shouldn't run in front of me.
No.
And then I said, but Spencer, you're the person with all the power. You can make that child feel better and feel happy.
I know where you're going.
He was only what, 2.5 years old. And power was like a magical word. And then he kind of ran into kids a little bit, not bad. So he could go, oh, I'm sorry, and help them up.
I wanted the power.
Until it evened out, it was kind of 2.5-year-old version.
Yeah.
So carry on with the deal. Sorry. It's just important to have both perspectives, you as the child.
Well, it was really important for me to understand that I'm not always on the receiving end of things. I'm not always in a response position. That I actually can be in control, that I have power, that I have influence. And because, and I don't know if this has been explained about 8, but just because you're my boss, just because you're my teacher, just because you're older than me, that doesn't automatically translate in my mind that I should do what you say, because it's one of those things where it's like, who decided that? I wasn't part of that panel that granted you this, authority in this area. So even though you were my parent, I still wanted to be like, but, and that whole, if anyone has an 8 kid, the whole like, because I said so, best of luck. Because
That's
that's not a line that lands well, because then it's like, well, why do you say so? I still don't understand, because I need to understand. So bringing me into the conversations and helping me fully get it, really sunk in well. I'll never forget this rule you had. If I find out from you, you'll be in way less trouble, because honesty matters and you got to keep your word. You got to be honest with each other. But if I find out by some other means, then it's much more. And so that instantly always put me in this scenario where I had to decide what was important. And I realized I had control. I had power in this situation. I'd be like, you know what? Not only do I have a way of being in less trouble, which is very motivating, but also I had a way of honoring a deal. And now if my mom had ever reneged on this deal, then it's all off, because I wouldn't know when this would happen. I needed to know where I stood. But every time, if I said something, it got immediately shortened. And on top of that, she would come to me and ask if I wanted a way to earn my video game console back, earn being able to hang out with friends sooner. And then so I had a way of earning it, which also felt really good. And I also felt like it was like this thing we were doing together. And even though, yes, now looking back on it, I clearly was not on equal ground as my parent. But it's kind of important to still have this team mentality, because
that you're doing it together and both are going to keep their word. And I had to keep my word in order for you to carry on choosing to tell me the truth, because I would keep my word.
Yeah.
And
do it if you're not doing it?
There were standard disciplines, but they were based on a crime. So if you were playing video games when you shouldn't, then you lost your video game privileges. But
that made a lot of sense to me.
But since what I really wanted was cooperation, I'd wait about 15 minutes to a half hour. And maybe his discipline was to lose video games for a day. And you know how hard that can be on a kid. I mean, it's like, oh my gosh, because it's so stimulating and exciting and just what a kid wants to do. And we each have our version of that. But I'd wait. And then what I really wanted was good behavior and to promote that rather than his idea of being punished. And I would say, would you like to earn your privileges back? Whatever it was usually games, but it could have been anything. And it was always yes. I said, okay, if you do this, 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 and this, which is what I wanted him to do to begin with when he was playing the video games. So in his mind, and this worked with my son who was a 6 as well. But in his mind, it was, oh yeah, I want the video game back. And we were co-creating the solution. He could have said, nope. Like when I was 12, I was disciplined unfairly for something because my parents were embarrassed. And my dad felt like, well, he had to go along with my grandparents and my mom. So I was grounded for a month. I had to be a slave. I had to write 1,000 times this long sentence about how I will not embarrass my parents. And it was 18 words. I remember that. You think I used to remember it. But, it was so wrong, my punishment. All I wanted to do was it was a Southern California, Santana. It was like 100 degrees and we were going to a football game. And to sit in the cheering section, you had to wear white. And my grandmother said, wear a coat, which to me was irrational because it was going to stay hot till tomorrow. And I just, oh, no, I don't need a coat. But because my grandparents thought that was disrespectful, I was then penalized for a month, which was unjust, really, except my parents were trying to teach in front of your grandparents, don't shame us, don't embarrass us, look like kids that do what you're supposed to. But we walk out the door. I could go anyhow because they hadn't had their discussion about how rude I was. But my brothers just took their jackets off and shoved it in the bushes. And I go, wait, why didn't you say you didn't want to wear your jacket? Go, well, because it's easier not to. And I said, you'd rather go with easy than the truth? They go, yeah. And I just thought they were unethical. And I was proud that I told the truth. And I wouldn't want to be sneaky and hide my jacket. I wanted to be honest and upfront. But I was missing how important it is to people to not feel shamed. And I was inadvertently shaming them. But my dad knew it was unjust, but I never once complained. I was cleaning things, cleaning out the freezer, the refrigerator, all the things I had to do. And he kept saying to me, Kate, have you learned your lesson? I go, you betcha. And he goes, oh, okay. What's the lesson that you learned? That you're really a fair and unjust person that does not hold yourself to the same standards. And I go back to cleaning. And he just kept trying every which way. But I said, nope, I'm going to do the full month because we were in a power struggle at that point. If he had said to me, Kate, it was a harsh punishment, but do you understand where we were going with that or why it even came up? I would have said, oh, yeah, sorry, Dad, I didn't understand that at all. It wasn't until later that came into my awareness. So you never want to initiate a power struggle with an 8. You will not win. And when 2 8s are in a power struggle, it's the 8 that's more stoic and can go without longer. But the 8 will not deviate. But you give them this much of understanding and they will turn right around. The way Spencer then did his chores, his homework, whatever it is he was supposed to be doing when he was playing his video games. So that's not easily understood. But if you do understand, like I had a teacher in 5th grade that knew I was a good kid. Because of his personality style, he didn't push on anything that would make me push back. Yet there was a situation where we learned this reading system. I think it was called SAR, reading scholastic aptitude, I think. And it was all different colors. And you had to read the stories that were really like Dick and Jane when you're 10 years old. But it had to do with reading. And then as you read more and more, each time you read a story, you then graded it yourself and colored in this chart. Concept really good. But for an independent, autonomous 8, I'm looking around and I'm seeing people around me reading these really interesting stories that I wanted to read. But it wasn't my color yet because I didn't read that fast because I have dyslexia. I jump lines. And I thought, well, I want to read that story about spaceships. And I read that story, went and took the test on spaceships, but I had to color in the color I wasn't. And I just was doing that for a few days, but a 6 saw me, and 6s are biologically meant to be the one to call off deviance of any type. So he told the teacher I was cheating. And the teacher had me stay after school. And he said, did you read a story and color in a different category? I said, yes. And he said, did you test yourself on the story you read? I go, well, of course. How could I answer the questions on a story I didn't read? That's another thing about the 8. It's like, really? And he said, why did you read a different story? And when I told him, he said, you can read whatever you want in any order you want. And you can read something from home. You can bring a book and write an essay. I go, no essays. No, I'd rather do the test. But that was a good teacher because he said, no, the whole idea is to teach you to want to read. You already want to read. So I don't care how you do it. But what I didn't understand is that kids wouldn't understand why I was given permission to read any story that I wanted because it deviated from the norm. And so eights do suffer from judgment, even if there's a person that is supportive. What I'm getting to is more about how you work with the eight when the power struggle arises. And not just, I mean, Spencer and I are going to talk about eights we've worked with, but it's also with every other Enneagram type. If you know they're the thing that they need most, it dramatically turns around the scenario. And actually, all kids want to be involved, but with an eight, you must go against what's been taught about boundaries. I can't tell you enough. I've had so many kids that have been sent to me because they were difficult. Even identical twins that were 3 years old, and the parents just couldn't understand why one twin was cautious, identical. If they were just in repose, you really couldn't tell them apart. And the one twin was cautious and had a Tritype that was 6, and then 2, and then 1. And the other twin was sexual and an 8-7-4. So they couldn't figure out what they did wrong, that the one twin, the 8 twin, wasn't following the procedure. And then I quickly could tell them nothing wrong. It's just a different Tritype and a different instinct, and how they had to work with basic rules, but they had to allow for the needs of both children. And then it turned around really quickly. But because people think anyone that's strong-willed is an 8, I became a master at working with kids because I was sent every Enneagram type that was difficult. And actually, the most difficult of all is the 6, because they're looking for a constant authority. They're testing in a different way than 8s. Once you pass the test with an 8 one time and you keep your word, it's a done deal. But if you're a 6, you're checking again. Is that person for real gonna do that? And it just takes longer. And it's the nature of 6 to question and to doubt. It's not the nature of 8 to question and doubt. Keep your word, and you're in my inner circle. If you're doing that, you break your word, you're out of my circle. It's just that simple, and it begins from birth. So I think the one thing I want to say before I hand it over to Spencer is that so much of type 8 was not disseminated in the early definitions of the Enneagram. And overall, the way it's written is that if you act out and you're strong-willed and you're opinionated and outspoken and you're angry, you're an 8. But it's just not true. You have to see what and who the 8 is protecting. So in that same age 10, a friend wanted to do something. There were 3 of us playing on the playground, and there were 2 friends that wanted to do something. I go, well, okay. And it was to check to see if one of the classrooms was open during Easter. And we went in, and I thought we were just going to change the names on the blackboard and have a good time. But one was a 1 and the other was a 9. And they begged me to never tell anybody, to give my word. Now, if you tell an 8 to give their word, what do you think happens? The 8 keeps their word. And I said, no, but it'll be fun to tell everybody, and wait till they get back from school. They'll have so much fun doing that instead of work. They'll be laughing and changing things around and having to put everything back in order. And that's a lot more fun than, working on math or something. But the 9, was the good girl. She couldn't make a mistake. And the 1 couldn't be wrong. And she felt like she'd done something morally wrong. Now, what I didn't know, she had talked on the tape recorder, and the 9 had taken money out of the desks. I didn't know anything about, and jewelry. I knew nothing about that. But the 1 ended up telling. And my mom said, see, she told the truth, you didn't. And I said, she did. Okay. And I didn't say anything. And the next day, she told on a Sunday. We did it maybe on a Saturday. And Monday, we were there first thing in the morning to tell the principal and the vice principal. And I was thought of as like the bad seed because I took the full blame because I'd given my word. I had taken nothing. I had gone into the room, and I later understood that that was a problem. But as a result, I was the only one punished. And I had to sit every day for recess and lunch in the principal's office. Like, everyone goes, what are you sitting here for? Are you here again? But I was proud of it, like with my dad, with that clash, because it was my responsibility to keep my word. And the additional punishment was to have me go every day after school, go to the classroom of the teacher whose room we had vandalized. We didn't hurt anything, but taking things, yeah, that's a problem. I agree. But they felt like, potentially hurting equipment was a big deal. So really, we were just being 10 years old in many, many ways. But she'd been told by the vice principal, who's also the teacher, my teacher that year, for all 3 of us. And he said, no, she's a good kid. I'll bet you anything that she's protecting the other 2. Why is she the only one taking the punishment? That's the question. He told this woman. And she's, when I came in, I was imagining I was going to have to wash the blackboards and sweep the floor, and I was going to just do it and feel honorable. But she didn't. She said, sit down. I go, sit down. She said, yeah. She started asking me questions. And no one had ever asked me questions like that, like who I was, what I wanted. And she said, let me ask you this. Would you want you as a friend? And first I said, yeah. And then I go, wait a minute. No, I wouldn't. And she said, why? And I said, I can talk behind a friend's back. I'm not always, saying everything nice. I can say, oh, Vicky's this way or so-and-so's that way. And she said, well, I'd want to be your friend. I go, why would you want to be my friend? Because she's like 22, just out of college, or 23. And I was 10, almost 11. And she said, no, I would want to be your friend because you took the rap for me. You took responsibility for me. And my eyes just were like, what? And she goes, no, I know you're not going to say anything. But the vice principal and I know you're doing that. And I respect you for it. But let's talk about other ways to keep your word. And for 6 weeks, I had to do that. Change my life. Because she did not make me wrong or bad. She found out my motivations for doing things. Didn't push me on the things I didn't want to say, because we talked about keeping our word. And I said, that's everything to me. And I'm not going to say anything. And she goes, oh, I know you're not, because you wouldn't be sitting here by yourself. So I'm here today because of her. And that's what the 8 needs, is someone that understands that the 8 has a big heart, a good heart, but you have to work with the 8's desire to lead and protect and be in charge. We still want to be in charge. I'm not saying that I didn't want to be in charge, but honor, according to the 8, is everything. Just like the pirates code, honor among thieves. It's everything to an 8. Would you say it differently, Spence? I'll hand it over to you.
that honor is everything to an 8. I would not say that differently. I think it's incredibly important, because what else are we doing here? I mean, I don't know if everyone feels that way, but like, I mean, the whole honor amongst thieves, people tend to focus on the thieves element, right? But it's like, no, there's still a code. We don't rat on each other. We don't do this. We don't do that. Every, dark part of society has a code, right? Where they don't do certain things that dishonors the people involved. It's recognizing all sorts of things, because the last thing that I want is to feel misrepresented. I have been mislabeled throughout my life for my actions, for my behaviors, and the amount of knowledge that people would have gotten throughout their life about me if they had simply done what your teacher did and asked why. It's a very simple question. They would learn all sorts of things, and the ones who did ask got it, because guess what? I'm honest. I will tell you, you asked me a question. What else are we doing here? So it's always frustrated me, because how often are we actually correct when we see something and that's 100% of the story? There's no such thing as a universal truth, at least is what I believe. It's really a spectrum, what this person thinks, what this person thinks, and everything in between. And it feels unfair. So I think there's a lot of, I think there's kind of really nothing more important than honor, because honor is giving someone, the golden rule, right? Just doing for someone else what you would want someone to do for you in that exact same scenario. Oh, this looks really bad. And then someone says it's not what it looks like. Well, let them explain at least, because maybe, just maybe, you walked in right after 2 people just left and you're the one with red paint on your hands when you actually weren't doing anything. So yes, honor is everything.
It's finding out. And, with the universal truth, everybody has a truth of their own bias. Now, is there a truth in the universe itself and universal truths? Yeah, I believe there are. But if you don't understand the circumstances, the culture, and if you can think of Enneagram type as personality diversity, which is the way I presented it in businesses, then it's like honoring the gifts of each type and how to work with each type, the dilemmas of each type. And, I'm going to be teaching a class coming up in the summer, I think, on working with each Enneagram type, where it'll be a 10-week class and I'll do 1 type each 3-hour session. And it's life-changing to realize someone might not be insulting you when you're an 8, because you think people are lying to you a lot, because you've tracked one piece of information in a situation and other people have tracked others, but you don't know it. And this is true of all 9 types, actually. But I noticed whenever I got together with my friends, many of whom I've known since I was 7, since I moved to that school, went all through high school with them. But even as adults, when we would talk about an event, I would say, no. Don't you remember Alan did X, Y, or Z? And they'd look at me surprised. Well, no, because Paula did ABC. And there are 4 of us that had stayed in close contact. And every time we get together and those stories come up, we still remember our part. But when I was younger, I thought that they were lying because I was there. I go, wait a minute, I was there. That's what John did. But someone else is talking about what they paid attention to. So once any of us understand that, but in particular an 8, then we don't feel like people are not on the up and up with us. And we're more trusting. We think, oh, okay, people see things differently, and it doesn't mean they're lying. But 8s have a vulnerability, a sensitivity to feeling lied to or manipulated. And even though we believe, yeah, no one can manipulate us, yeah, we can. And we've had it happen, and we never want it to happen again. So we have an even stronger defense and a stronger defense and a stronger defense and a stronger defense saying, yeah, you can't get to me. And that's what we don't want to see happen with a child. But when we work with someone that's an adult, we have to realize that happened because no one explained to them, because they didn't know this way in which each of the Enneagram types and the 27 Tritypes with their instinctual stacking will view the world. So is there more you want to say on that, Spence? I also remember with you, when you were about 7, it was the parent-teacher conference, and I went in, and you happened to have a 164 teacher, and she put your work in front of me and said you were a problem child and that she was going to not accept it. And I said, oh, are those Waldos on that paper? And she said, what? And it was the time when the kids did Where's Waldo? And I was reading it to Spencer, and he was in first grade. And he loved doing Waldos. So he would put Waldos everywhere. And on his work, where they were supposed to write whatever, he'd put little Waldos on the paper. And she said, what are Waldos? And I explained it to her. And I said, he's just trying to help you have fun while you're grading his paper. I'll bet you anything, because he does that to make people have fun. And she said, well, I'm going to have to look into Waldo's. I said, oh, no. And she said, but I didn't say you could put anything on this paper. I said, yeah, but did you say you can't put anything? And she
didn't say I couldn't either.
Yeah. So I said, ask him, that's just my opinion. I could be wrong, but I know him, and he does it for everybody. He gives them little Waldos on note papers, on things you really don't want them on, but it might be documents, but you're all going to get Waldos. And it's very age appropriate for a 6-year-old, but the automatic understanding for her was that she was being disregarded by him. And it wasn't that at all. He was actually trying to help her have fun, because he envisioned that. And then I went home and asked him, and he said, oh yeah, because it must be really hard to grade papers. That must be really boring. And then he later did it in another way with the kids when you were in 6th grade or 7th grade, 6th grade, I think.
Yeah.
We sat upside down in the class.
Well, I could tell that they were bored, and I wanted people to enjoy the class. And so I thought it'd be really funny if I sat in the chair upside down, because no one does that. And of course, the class erupted in laughter, because it's just a bonkers.
You got to tell them how you put your hat though on your feet, and you.
Oh, yeah, I forgot I did that. Well, because that's where the hat goes. I don't know. I was 11, so I didn't really think it through much. But I remember the teacher believing that was a personal affront to her.
Same.
I was trying to throw off her thing. And I was just totally confused by that. I'm like, you're teaching. Like, I'm not doing that for you. Like, I'm looking at other people yawning. I'm looking at people leaning on their hands like this. And I'm trying to bring some life into this damn place. So I thought it'd be funny to make everyone laugh. And of course, I wasn't recognizing that it was disrupting stuff. And may I add, she laughed too. She tried not to, because she covered her mouth, because she's not supposed to laugh at that. But I'm pretty sure I was the first kid that ever did that. So it threw her. So yeah. I didn't see what the big deal was. She thought it was funny too. So I thought that was really unfair.
Yeah, she later didn't, because in the parent-teacher meeting over it, she felt like it was an act of disrespect, which when I told you that, you were horrified, because you laughed too, and you wanted everybody to laugh.
Yeah.
So, and it was after recess. So she actually hadn't started teaching yet. Do you remember that?
Oh yeah, yeah, that sounds right.
How would you have gotten into the position you see it
Yeah,
unless?
I was surprised no one noticed me doing it. I sat like that for like what felt like 5 minutes. So it was probably 15 seconds, but still, like no one even noticed. I had to say something to the girl next to me, and then she was like, "What?" And then that's when everyone looked, and then that's when everyone laughed. So yeah, but you were asking me if there's something I would add. Are we still on the honor
Yeah,
topic?
any of it, anything that you feel is,
Yeah.
and
I
then eventually how you work with eights.
yes, as I said before, honor is everything, and here's why. Um, you know what you're going to get from me. So I want to know that that we have that mutual understanding. What you see is what you get. I'm going to be consistent. I'm going to have your back. I'm not going to switch it up on you. The only reason I would switch it up is because the circumstances have switched. And let's be honest, it's usually because the other person has switched it. And so there's an honor in that. It's like, hey, I'm being authentic with you. I'm being real with you. We're both doing that, right? Like I'm like removing the armor, letting you in. That's what we're doing here, right? We both understand this, and then people will give me the impression that that's what's happening, and then I will relax. And then when that's not the case, it feels like the biggest betrayal. And I'm sure 9 out of 10 times it's not like that for them. They're a different type. It's not where their head's at, you know. But it feels that way to me. There's an honor in having that consistency, in being that support, in not switching it up, in making it so that someone else feels safe, right? Because really, in truth, even though I'm getting all big chested and I'm acting like this doesn't hit me and that doesn't hit me, and I always know the answer to everything and I always know what to say, um, the truth is I want to feel safe too. I want to know that you're not going to flip it on me. It took years to even be able to say that kind of thing out loud, because the truth is I don't want to at all sound like anyone has the ability to um, impact my strength. And even as I say that right now, my head is screaming at me, saying no one can touch that. That's your shit, and that's it. So the truth is just taking years, honestly becoming a therapist and recognizing feelings are real. So it's
Yeah, I
just,
told you it was good that you went 5 years telling me.
yeah, exactly. So it's, and as I segue that into working with eights, eights run into this all the time. Eights are constantly misinterpreted for their actions. They're seen as going against authority. They're seen as undercutting someone when really they're just trying to be helpful. They're trying to add to something, or maybe they see someone who's doing something that's not fair to everyone else, and it just happens to be a superior. And so they're trying to, influence the scenario. They're trying to work together with someone who's not on their equal level in
Or
terms
call
of
it off, or call it off.
something like that. So I always, always, always honor their heart and I honor their intention. The epic change in micro expressions, the change in their face, the change in their disposition, when I honor something like that, and I'm just like, my guess is you're really trying to do this. Like, because what I know about you, it doesn't seem like you're a bad person. My guess is you were trying to do something different. There was maybe something that you wanted to do, but you did it this way and it didn't get you there. I do this thing all the time with my hands. Like, this is what we want. This is what we're doing. Does it get us there? That's like my number one thing I do with eights, because you can't argue that. It's not me challenging you. It's not me saying that you're wrong. It's like, this is what you want, right? Okay, this is what you're doing. Is that getting you there? And then an eight will be honest and they'll be like, no, but it should. Why? Why should it? Right? And then we can kind of do that back and forth thing. And my mom was saying earlier with the whole break the rules of boundaries, I do it all the time as a therapist. Obviously, nothing unethical because there are, things that exist for a reason. But I let them, if they have questions for me, I let that be known because I want them to know that this is a two-way thing. If they're really going to open themselves up to me and make it to where they can, be real and be authentic and maybe go where it's uncomfortable, to try to achieve some real change, to improve something for themselves. I want them to know I'm willing to do that with them. And that's honestly a thing that doesn't happen a lot because we're just big and tough, right? It's just the truth of it. I right now, my back's killing me and you probably can't tell. It's just one of those things where we just don't show those things because it's weakness, right? Someone can look at that and see that they can't depend on us because, oh, there is an element where we won't be consistent, where we won't be there for them, where we will flip the script. Maybe we might be too big, too loud, too this, too that. A lot of times I'm having to like remember, if I have that mental wherewithal, that I have to like make myself smaller because I come in and I take over a party, I take over a thing, and it's never intentional. I remember this girl I was dating. She was trying to become a sommelier. None of her friends were trying to be sommeliers, but whatever. Everyone heard free wine. Yeah, let's do this. And so she's having us all drink wine, and we're supposed to say what we taste. And I don't know what I'm tasting. Fruity, I don't know, right? And so we're supposed to do this thing like a very specific way. And I could tell that people didn't really know what to do, and they didn't really feel like they knew what they were talking about. So I realize now maybe I was being a little bit of an asshole, but I wasn't trying to be. I was just trying to be funny. And so I was just like, oh, I taste grapes, right? Clearly the main element in making wine. And people just laughed. And then that really just opened things up. And they're like, oh, yeah, I taste this and blah, blah, blah. And I'm reading the back of the bottle. I'm like, this is supposed to taste like tobacco? Why would anyone want tobacco in wine, right? And then so we're going back and forth, back and forth. In my opinion, the evening was saved. We had a great time. We drank way more. It was really fun. And my girlfriend looked like she was having a good time. I found out later that wasn't the case, that I had shifted the entire thing that was trying to be done here. But it was no different than sixth grade all over again, right?
It was sixth grade all over again.
Yeah, because like I don't understand what changed. It's not like over the course of the evening they're going to start recognizing hints of cherry with a dash of earthy. Like that's not a.
That was her hope. That was her hope.
Yes.
And depending on whether she was a heart type or a head type or a gut type, yeah, as a heart type, it was going to unfold for her. Mm-hmm. It was going to be a way she could share with people and they could discover something that she loved. So yes, they were probably uneasy, and you were both correct, but in a way it was her thing. Mm-hmm. And we do step into power vacuums. It's one of the strengths and weaknesses of 8. If someone's holding the situation and everyone's good with it, you won't hear a word out of the 8. Like in that class with that vice principal that was my teacher, if it hadn't been for that event over Easter, I never had a problem with him because he was not, I think he was my Tritype leading with 7, but he got me, I got him, didn't bring up my defiance. And there's a difference between rebelliousness and defiance, by the way. And you have to see the person you're considering as an 8. If they're rebellious, they're not an 8. An 8 is defiant. They don't do it and show you they're not going to do it. And
no, persistent. You won't have to wonder.
It's not back and forth, right? And it's only because a power struggle has come up, where both 8 and 6 test, and many counterphobic 6s or people who have 8 in the Tritype, they seem like 8s, and I totally get it. But as I mentioned, with all the people that I've worked with that think they're 8s, they don't understand the full dynamic of 8. And you have to have all the other characteristics of 8, willing to take responsibility for others because they're your people. There's just so many factors. But the thing is that you wanted, I think, Spencer, this would be my guess, everyone to have a good time so that your girlfriend would not be uncomfortable. And in that situation, she really, if she had pulled you aside and said, Spencer, help me out here, it's kind of awkward. But that power vacuum thing is such an issue, because if someone doesn't hold the power, like a teacher that's weak and changing their mind, the 8 goes and takes charge, because we're meant to do that. It's a biological imperative. Just like the 6 is meant to call off when things are not following the rules, and the 1s are meant to create the rules and the loopholes. By the way, every type has a counter measure, and the 2s are meant to notice what's needed emotionally, and the 3s are meant to figure out the most efficient way to do things and to do it in a way that people will respond positively. And the 4s are meant to focus on what's missing, and the 5s are meant to go after knowledge and information and conceptually think of how to handle things. The 6s are meant to call off what's deviant, or to react, rehearse, prepare, and then know what to do when something happens that's a pattern. And the 7 is meant to show us different options and possibilities and ways to make something pleasurable. And the 8 is meant to call off the truth as the 8 sees it. And the 9 is meant to harmonize and try to restore a sense of balance. And so each type is doing what they're meant to do. It's only when we don't understand that we may be coming from our defense strategy without realizing it. Like, I was bored in that reading class. Spencer was bored in his classroom where he was upside down. In both cases, we were bored, and it was hard. We also have ADHD, so we sitting still was not easy, and we'd just think, okay, we can change this up quick, without intending to be disrespectful, even though we value respect above all things, along with honor. We have to learn that other people might feel that we've treated them with disrespect by our behavior. So it's all relative. But Spencer, when you have a kid that's an 8 and they're defiant with you, how do you break that stance of defiance?
Well, first off, I recognize that they're testing me. They wanna know that, because a lot of times an 8, if they don't feel safe, they see themselves as this, so they'll present this, so that if you can handle this, they know that they can actually relax and be themselves at here. So I had this client who started off the session saying they were a neo-Nazi, all sorts of things right away to dissuade me from wanting to work with them. Just because they were ready for me to reject them off the bat. I picked up really quickly that this was something that they were just trying to push me away so that they could be the one that pushed away instead of being pushed away. And so all I did is like, okay, so I'm hearing that you want me to know that you're this, 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 and this. So what is your favorite thing about neo-Nazism? And because I kind of figured that that's what was happening, and that really stumped him because now he had to answer me. And he's like, well, it's not really like a thing I believe. I just, I'm trying to say that because, you probably don't want to talk to me and I don't want to talk to you. I'm like, oh, okay. So you are trying to just kind of throw things out there to see whether or not I'm willing to talk to you. So I'm constantly reflecting back what they're doing, and I'm getting to know them as a person. And I'm not seeing these big walls and defenses, because it's the whole, like I always say, like, there's like multiple circles, right? And so like, first you get in this like outer circle, and like the really, really close people, they're on this one. But you first got to get in this circle first. So that wall you're seeing, that defense, that's just the first circle, and you're just on the outside. So it looks like a wall. But the truth is, it's just the first line of defense to see how authentic, how real they can be. because throughout an eight's life, they are shown very quickly you can't always be real because other people see that as problem, sees that as rude, sees that as inappropriate, sees that as that's not an okay sense of humor, whatever the case may be. And so we tend to start looking for the rejection. Hence the world is a dangerous place, and we need to be strong and survive it. So kind of not unlike the six, we're kind of scanning to see like, okay, like, are you another authentic person? Right? Are you another one? Right? Are we like? And so I break through that by being unfazed, really trying to show them like the whole concept of therapy is that you show up as you need to, dude. That's it. And I'm not here to judge you. I'm not here to shame you. I'm here to support you. And I'm going to continually show you, I'm going to hold my end of the bargain. And once that happens, it's a whole nother ballgame, completely other ballgame. Turns out not a neo-Nazi at all. So it's just one of those elements.
It's a flippant remark. Eights will be flippant. Sixes will provoke in a different way. They're like sixes are going to provoke like this, whereas the eight's going to bring out the hammer and go, poof. But either way, we're both provoking to see what comes up. Like if you saw something and poked it with a stick, and then we base what we do next on that. And like when I work, even with adult eights, I'll be doing the inquiry and asking questions, what they mean by the word in there that they've answered on the Enneagram questionnaire, and they'll say something. And I always do what's right. And I said, yeah, another fairy tale. That's what I tell myself too. And they're so caught off guard. They go, well, I guess I don't, but I want to be right. And then it immediately changes the dynamic. But I have to say something important here. And that is an eight can work with an eight very differently than the other types. Depending on what type you are, you still have to be authentic to your type, or the eight won't like it, because the eight can immediately tell if you're congruent with what you're saying. But an eight with another eight, you know how to say it. And it's so spontaneous that it lands. And the eight goes, yeah, I guess so. But if you're like trying to be really nice and considerate and trying to word things perfectly, the eight's going to go, whoa.
What are you hiding?
Well, what?
What's your deal?
How are you trying to manipulate me?
Yeah.
So traditional things don't work for that reason. But if you just say, okay, are you here because you want to be? You have to be. What's the reason? And just begin with, you might have a standard way of doing that because you don't know that they're an eight yet. But if you have depending on how they respond, if they go, or if you say so, because the eight will own their own authority. So you actually will be able to tell pretty quickly, but you might not necessarily know when the eight's still messing with you, but they'll always mess with you at first. Mm-hmm. Even if they don't want to, even if they're not intending to, it's just a part of what defiance is all about. It's like, what are you made up of? What do you care about? Or, Nate might say, well, why do you care? I go, I don't know. I'm here. I have to be here. I'm being paid to be here. You don't have to talk to me. And they go, really? I go, yeah, no, don't have to talk to me at all. I'm talking about kids now. With adults, I can say the same thing in an adult version. You made the appointment. What is it you want me to help you with? And it's just like calling off a truth from one eight to another eight works really effectively. But saying the same thing from your own style. And the person who helped me so much when I was 11 was a 2, by the way. And she just actually asked me things, but she was a 2 that had 8 in the Tritype. So she wasn't, I mean, at first I did kind of go, what? Why would you want to be my friend? I'm thinking, you're like a lot older than I am. But then literally, she forever changed my life. But it took a few days of going every day and realizing, oh, she's not really pushing me to do things. She is being understanding in a way I hadn't experienced in my life. So it can take a while, is what I'm saying with an 8. But the other thing is the instinct. A sexual 8 or sexual type in general is going to want to get to know the client or the person on a more personal level. And sexual 8s tend to reveal more about themselves. Like when I made that comment to an 8 client. Yeah, another fairy tales. That's what I said too before I knew I was an 8. And it's like, I want something from you. What do you want from me? And I'll give you something. It's like playing a card, like playing war, only in a way it's like equal, because the 8 is completely focused on things being equal. So if there's a problem and someone has betrayed us or perceived, our perception is they betrayed us, we're going to do the same exact thing to that person, given the right circumstances. So let's say we have a friend, like I have a friend that is another type, and I say, gee, can you help me on such, and it's really hard. 8s never ask for help, ever. But if they do, they kind of expect you to help or to have a reason why you're not going to help. And if you don't help, it could take a year or a week or 5 years. But there'll come a time, if the 8's unaware, when you ask for that same exact kind of favor, and the 8 will say, nope. And the person will ask, why not? Say, well, do you remember when I asked you in 1980? And let's say it's now, and you didn't do it? Well, I want you to know what it feels like. Okay, now we're even. And the 8 wants even. 8s are not vindictive. They're vengeful. And maybe vengeance needs to be served cold, meaning it could be a year or 2 years later. But it's always going to be exactly equal, and we're going to tell you when we've done it. So it's not like you have to wonder, well, when's this going to happen? Because you don't know when we feel betrayed, because it would have to be really bad for us to say so, because we're going to go close down, stone, total stone. Whereas if we were a heart type, like a 4, or a head type like a 6, who can be quite reactive, and Spencer has all 3, then we're going to be different. The 4 is going to, every time they have the memory, they're going to feel it as though it were happening again. And the 6 is going to be reactive and constantly check things. The 8's not going to check and recheck. It's like a known fact. You've just moved from this place on the circle out to here. You may not know it, but then slowly you can work your way back in. If you are, you've earned it back in a way, according to the 8 values. But a sexual 8 is always going to be more interpersonal. They're always going to see you in multi-dimensions. If they've chosen to be a coach or a therapist, and if you noticed on the panel that I did on 8s, every single person I had ended up being either a coach or a therapist. It's not unnatural, because 8s do want to help people feel empowered. It may not be other words, But empowering people is really important. And even when I was in an image consultant, it was all about empowerment. And the other image consultants would say to me, Katherine, what's your thing with power? What does image have to do with power? It's empowerment this, it's empowerment that, or how you can have power and you don't want people to be disempowered. And I said, oh, well, let me tell you about another system. And I said, that stands to reason that that would be my focus. So find out what the 8 considers power to be. And it may not be what you value power as, but it gives you a point to work with. But 8s have a way around the superego when they have sexual, because they create a bridge or a bond, and they're patient. They will wait until the person, whether it's you or your child or another 8, is ready to say it. Well, we just continue the discovery process. Well, why do you feel that way about that rather than like this? I know I kind of felt like that when I was your age. Why do you feel the way you do? Kids will answer you. With adults, same thing. Well, when did you start feeling that way? And what were the factors that you were dealing with? No one usually asks that. And, you know, in therapy, those of you that are coaches or therapists, you know all the strategies that are meaningful, but there's a lot more to it. So how would you answer that, Spencer, as a sexual now?
I just really focus on connecting with them, honestly. I really try to focus on I'm specifically, I'm a client-centered therapist. And for those who don't know that term, it means I let the client come in, letting me know where they want to go with that session. We could have been totally talking about apples in one session, and now we're going to talk about zebras in the very next one, right? It's completely, does not have to be linear. And I really try to make it known that they can't do this wrong. And that my whole thing here is to be here for you, to give you the tools to figure out a better way to approach something that maybe you have a current thing for, but clearly it's not the ideal thing to approach this with. So I just want to help you come up with a more effective way, a way that feels more authentic to you, something that better represents you. That's why I'm here. I'm here to help you get where you're trying to go the way you want to get there. So I make it really, really clear that I'm here to help you be you and get what you want. I'm not here to tell you to do it another way, although in the back of my mind, I'm constantly thinking of all the things I'd rather have you do and tell you to do, because I still have the natural instinct to be like, just do this. Then I have to remember, no, that's not what I'm supposed to do. And so, yeah, I really try to just focus on that. I will, if I catch them in a moment where they're really feeling something and I see them trying to get away from there, my 8 really comes out because I go, go back right there. The thing you just said, what was that? And then we kind of stick with that. And because I'm smiling and because I'm just being so authentic, they start learning like, whoa, oh, you're just kind of this real person with me. At least that's how I'm hoping I'm coming off, right? So, yeah, I mean, I'm not entirely sure of all the things that I do, because some of it, I guess, I'm not realizing.
Or you're doing it intuitively. I work
Right.
I work the same way, Spence. I mean, I do the in-depth inquiry process, which you know as well, but you have different methodologies that you use that I don't. But I have studied every type of approach and gained a great deal from it. And as many of you know, I know microexpressions, I know body language, I know syntax, sentence structure, many systems that I knew long before I learned the Enneagram. So it was very easy for me to correlate the Enneagram with these other things that I'd known longer. But I follow your emotions. And the way I know your emotions is by your expressions and micro expressions. So even though you might say, yeah, that didn't bother me, but if you show a gesture that says it bothers you, I'll say, well, what did you just see? Like if your eye just went and looked and came right back, so you just saw something, what was it? And then it's different because people have to stop and say, oh, I didn't see anything. I go, yeah, I actually did for a fraction of a second. When you go there again, I'll tell you. And then as the session goes on, it's not like I'm looking at the person saying, oh, what expression are they having now? It's more that it seems like a conversation and a kind of a infinity. You say something, I say something, we respond. I ask you to explain more about it. And then I stop you, like Spencer was suggesting, when it's incongruent. And that's when we can get to the feeling under and behind the superego. We can get around the superego to find out what really bothers you that maybe you've put into denial, or you've moved away from your conscious understanding of yourself. So things that normally would take years to get to, as all of you know with the Enneagram, if you're even here, you have some idea that the Enneagram reveals something really significant. It was life-changing for me to learn about the Enneagram. I thought, oh, I mean, everyone has their own truth. It was just that simple. In one way, I mean, I'd taken classes since I was 20 years old on working with people because I was a manager working with thousands of people, and I needed to know how to handle them and different skills. So I was taking things as a part of my career for many, many, many years. But it's different with the Enneagram because it cuts through behavior and goes to motivation. And once you understand that there are these different motivations, you can collapse like an accordion what would take so long to get to. And then knowing micro expressions collapses even more. Knowing the 4 things that destroy a relationship and what they are and how they do it, and many, many, many systems to work with couples. But they're all systems. And the more systems we have, the more tools we have to work with you, whether it's Gottman's work or Harley's work on the emotional needs, his needs, her needs, or Harville Hendricks and getting the love you want. I mean, each person that's done any work has learned something. And the more you know, the better you are at facilitating it. And those of you that are coaches and therapists know that it's a toolbox. But the Enneagram is something altogether different. And you have to be yourself when you're a coach or a therapist or someone in therapy, but you also need to modify knowing the sensitivities and vulnerabilities and areas of the person that's working with you, because they have their own set of values. So it's finding out as quickly as possible what those values are and having a way to validate them. And my particular focus is neutralizing. Most people conceal things that they feel were really bad, even from their therapists and their coaches. And I can't tell you how many times people tell me, I've been in therapy for 20 years. I never told anyone this or that. And it's because I normalize. If they're saying something they think they did as a kid and it strikes me as a normal thing, I like age appropriateness too, by the way. That is normal for a 10-year-old to do, a 12-year-old to do, or something that might seem sexually inappropriate. I know about that too. And if I think it's cute, it's very hard for me to not smile and say, yeah, but that's what you do when you're 10, or you don't know any differently. You haven't learned yet about this, or this. And it normalizes things in such a way that people begin to realize, and I'm not going to judge them. It doesn't matter what they did. They're there for support. So why would I judge them? Literally, about anything. And I mean that sincerely. I've had pretty extreme things. But if you are neutral and normalize, it goes so much further. And a lot of times parents have been exasperated by a child and they've done things. I yelled at my child. I said this, I did this, and they don't want to tell me. And over time they'll say, but you don't understand. You don't know what I said. I said, I can imagine. And all that matters is that you care, or you wouldn't even be bringing it up now. And it's an opportunity to learn more.
The idea is basically that when working, a lot of what she was saying before, validate. And honestly, that's really true for working with anyone. But for eights, it's this constant thing of being misunderstood and misrepresented. So trying to acknowledge, trying to understand, and creating the space where you're not responding in some way that comes off as judging. I'm constantly I'm having my hands right here and I'm just nodding, maybe doing a thing like this, showing that I understand along the way, things like that, just really subtle things. And if you see like them get all stiffed up and then they all of a sudden get quiet, chances are they think they just said something that normally would lead to rejection. So in that moment, the word powerful comes up for me a lot. I tend to be like, I feel like you just said something that was really powerful because I noticed you stopped talking. I noticed something shifted. Can you expand on that? Can you tell me a little more about that? And hearing that it's powerful makes a big difference because it is, right? It's this big moment that made them completely switch gears. The train was going here and all of a sudden they pulled that switch and it took them, I don't know what that thing's called, but they went down the other train tracks now. And it's making it known, first off, that's totally okay. We can be talking about apples and you can switch it to zebras on a dime. That's fine. We're here to talk about what you need to. Even if I'm going full steam ahead and I think I'm talking about what you want to talk about because you just said it, you can actually jump in, interrupt me, and be like, actually, that makes me think of this other thing that I wish I mentioned to begin with, but I totally forgot. Totally, cool. What is it? And then you just switch. Because it's the idea of just making it known you can show up exactly as you need to show up. This is that if there's no other place, this 1 hour, once a week, or however frequent it is, this is that time where you can be, and I've got your back. I will be there. I will walk alongside you. I'm your teammate. I'm not here against you. I'm not here to do anything else but to just support you and help you, right? I like Jerry Maguire, like help me help you, right? So that's really the
like in Good Will Hunting, willing to.
Oh yeah, it's the main reason I became a therapist. Robin Williams as a therapist, oh hell yeah, right? It's not your fault.
How about ordinary people?
It's not your fault.
Same kind of thing where the therapist just finally, sets a boundary, calls it off, and then the person sees something in a new way.
I think the whole, obviously I try not to make a habit out of interrupting my clients because, last thing you want to do is make them feel like what they're saying doesn't matter. But it's the idea that it's, at least for me, and I forgive me if I sound like I come off like my style is like the way to go, right? Again, 8 over here, my apologies. It's not my intention. I'm just very proud of my approach. But the idea is I want it to feel like we're having a discussion over coffee or over a drink or whatever your thing is. So sometimes when people talk, they jump in, they go, oh, interesting. And when you say that, do you mean this? And we're just kind of going back and forth. The last thing I want is to be this other, thing that's not me, whatever that is. And because that way I'm sending the message to them, you can also be exactly who you are. That's what we're doing here, right? Again, creating that dynamic that I want in my life wherever I go, right? So that's kind of what I really love about the therapy realm, is because hopefully the idea is people show up as their authentic self, if at least we're nowhere else they can. So, yeah.
Yeah. So with each type, there's just some things you don't want to do. Like one's already criticized themselves. So the most important thing to remind the one is that you know how critical they are of themselves. And if they weren't critical, what would it be? Like what have you already told yourself about this situation? And find out what it is, and then you have a way to show them other ways of looking at the same scenario that they're beating themselves up about.
Yeah, I tend to ask based on what. They'll have this idea in their head. This is for ones specifically that makes them bad, wrong, things like that. And I'll be like, oh, based on what? And oftentimes that little downward arrow approach helps them realize that someone else defined that. Typically society or the culture within their household that they grew up in. And then realizing, and is that something that you identify with? And a lot of times, and this happens for everybody, there's a certain point in our lives where we realize, oh yeah, there's a thing I was raised with, and then there's this time in my life where I decide if I actually agree with that, and if that's something I want to carry into my consciousness and how I present myself to everyone else, and I don't know, raise my kids that way, whatever the case may be. So reminding ones of that moment that like you also have this, you have this moral compass where you're even more critical of yourself than anyone else could ever be of you.
Right. You've developed a standard higher than society's standard.
Yeah. So clearly you mean to be good. You want to be good. So what are you basing this off of?
And then with twos, what they don't realize is how their good intentions can feel controlling to people. And they're trying so hard to mirror you and others that when it goes wrong, they really don't get it. And helping the two understand that they are trying to help people and they help many, many people. But when it goes wrong, what does that mean? And what age were they when they first had that feeling? I always like to go to age because I feel the personality can be very mature in 9 of 10 areas and very immature in another area. And we need to know how immature it is and what age that part of the personality got fixed and stopped growing. And then it can mature. That doesn't mean it'll come back to total maturity because we have different parts of our egos that are different ages, but by tagging it is extraordinary. For the two, it's they work so hard to be seen as the good person. Like the one doesn't want to be the bad person, but the two must be the good person. So if they get criticism, it's devastating. Now the one will just say, well, I'm my own authority and I know I was doing what was right. But the two, it's like, well, I know what's good for you better than you know what's good for you. But deep down, each type struggles with those feelings. How do you work with twos, Spence?
Well, I'm very playful with twos, and I will like, yeah, because my guess is you're picking up on the fact that you know how to help them better than they do, and that's something that they tend to gel with very quickly because they can tell. Hopefully by this point, right? This is again 8 being playful, and I hope you know that I'm joking with you, kind of thing. But at the same time, it's like I really focus on with twos. In my experience, they tend to be very results focused. So with a two, if it's when I tried to help, I didn't completely fix it. I didn't make the problem go away. I didn't create the ideal scenario that we were shooting for. And they completely forget that they showed up in the first place, that they were there next to you trying. And because the two is so trying hard to be the good friends, the good parent, the good this, there's a lot of expectations that gets put on that to where it's like, this needs to look a certain way. They visualize it. I'm going to come in and I'm going to just wipe all these problems away. And I'm here for you. Also, would you like a cupcake? Right. So it's like this whole concept that it's just coming in and just saving the day and realizing sometimes there isn't a perfect result for this. But the most important thing is you showed that person, whoever they are to you, that you'll stick it out with them. And if it doesn't go that way, we can't control the results. That's an external thing. What we can control is our effort, and you had bundles of that. Because
And
there's that.
our intent with both 1
Yeah.
and 2 and
Yeah.
8, actually, intent is everything.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Well,
more than 9/10 of it. It's literally critical. And like, there's no point in telling a 1 that they should not try to do things at the highest standard. That what we can tell them is, rather than getting mired in the details, to figure out and not deliver something on time because you've got to get it right, but to find out what the parameters are that the other is looking for. And the same thing with the 2. There's no point in telling the 2 to stop focusing so much on others, but
good luck.
Instead just say, well, when you focus on others, what does it do for you? And usually the 2 will find that they're focusing on a part of themselves. And then with 3, well, I should say that the 1 is focused on standards and errors, and the 2 is focused on the relationship and their value to you, their worthlessness. I mean, they have a fear of worthlessness. So they have to be valued in your eyes. They want to see themselves in your eyes, whether they're a client or a therapist. And when their intent is honorable, you will be able to get, notice I use an 8 word, but if their intent is kind and sensitive and understanding, then you will eventually be more of yourself, whatever your Enneagram type is. But with the 3s, they need admiration, and their fear is inefficiency. And why is inefficiency a problem? Because they can't check off as many things and feel the same self-worth. So there's no point in telling them to slow down. They already know that. It's better to tell them that there are times when it's better to be who you truly are, so that you have the opportunity of becoming more than to be what you think you need to be for admiration. Because there's a strong chance you'll be admired for your true self with the right people. And they can test it and experiment with it. How do you work with 3s?
Well, with 3s, I first honor the fact, exactly like you said, it's not about slowing down. That would be like telling an 8 not to go into this world with that guard in the first place, right? So it's understanding, validating them and being like, look, your accomplishments are wonderful things, but they aren't your full representation. Because again, just like I mentioned with the 2, that's an external thing. You can work your butt off and you can just totally kill the game, but then someone else gets Employee of the Month, right? And then now all of a sudden you are not the best representative of what a great employee at this company is. And that is a huge button. I am not the epitome of blah, blah, blah. I am not the best example of, I am not a winner, right? Like second place, that's first loser, right? So it's the whole concept that's like, again, you get to decide your worth because you kicked ass. You worked that hard. And sometimes people aren't going to recognize that, or they will recognize it. But I don't know, did you win Employee of the Month the other 2 months? Maybe they're trying to spread it around. Like, what's going on, right? What's more specific? So
They still want it, though. And
I know.
Because they need that hit of, yeah, it's so true. That's really great feedback, Spence, because admiration is their coin.
Mm-hmm.
And, all heart types need their version of admiration. And with the 4, they want to be admired for uniqueness because they learn very young, based on their coping strategy and defense strategy, that whatever they did that was different, unique, and kind of an accomplishment, not just an achievement, was valued. Often it's because they're precocious and very articulate, very young, but they avoid the mundane. So there's no point in saying, well, now you need to not need to be so original and unique, because it won't work. So you have to tell them that it's better to find satisfaction in one tiny thing that you did, or in a relationship or a circumstance, to then know who you truly are, to know more about you. And since 4s are looking outward, only after they've looked inward, like, yeah, I feel this, I sense this, what am I feeling? Then when they realize it's just something they feel, then they look out into the world and come up with the conclusion, oh, then that's human, or everybody feels that way.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the extroverted types look outward and then inward. So don't focus on telling the 4 not to begin at the beginning. Encourage it. Yeah. What do they sense in their body? And then show them how they can move outward and for it to have value. How do you work with, or you have 4 in the Tritype?
Yeah. Well, I make it known that it's actually their superpower. But just like any kind of superpower, right? Like I don't know how many of you guys have watched superhero movies or whatever, but sometimes when there's a big battle where you're using your superpowers, you're also like totally just destroying the city, right? You're like, wrecking buildings and things like that, right? So, it's recognizing, because they have this innate ability, or I guess because it's part of me too, right? This innate ability to recognize feelings, so that it can actually be really hard to separate how much of this am I feeling and how much of this are you feeling. 4s are really, really great when you're venting to them about something else. But when they are the source of your pain, it can get really muddy, because they're feeling their own shame, their own guilt, their own pain about being that source at the same time as yours. So it's just this whole thing of not being able to separate it. So I first off honor, yes, this is your superpower, your ability to pick up on all the shifts of the emotions and recognize this and to empathize. But it also remembering, that's real, how heavy it is, how that feels, it's a real thing. But maybe the number to which you're giving it on a scale of 1 to 10 might not be all of what you're feeling. You might be using your superpower and adding someone else's feelings to that. And so you don't need to, feel that, shamed, or that this or that, much, because really what you're doing is you're combining the emotions in the attempt
and refeeling them.
And refeeling, yeah.
And they don't need to refeel them.
Nope.
To have a sense of self.
Nope.
Yeah.
Because there's an authenticity, right? 4s really want that authenticness. I know I just said authenticness is not a word. I'm going to correct that right away. That authenticity. And so when they have that real moment, 4s are willing to just dive in, right? If this is an uncomfortable emotional conversation where others are like, oh, I don't know, 4s are already there waiting for you to get there, right? Yeah. So because that's not uncomfortable. That's where they live, right? So it's I guess if I'm sticking with the superhero analogy, that's Krypton for Superman, right? Because that's home.
Yeah, there's a Krypton for all of us.
Right, but at the same time, that is the weakness, right? Because it's the emotions that can really throw things off, because they don't know all the time if they're not slowing it down and being like, okay, I understand that I feel this, you're feeling that, and I'm also empathizing simultaneously. Oh man, it's so much. You add in my 8 and my 6 combined, I don't know what the hell I'm feeling sometimes, and how much of it is this and how much of it is that. So I have to slow it down. Breaks are hard to do.
Yep. Whereas with the 5, it's all about gathering knowledge. And again, it makes no sense to tell them to not gather as much knowledge. Instead, it's important to tell them there are times when they should share their knowledge and that's wisdom. And a lot of times fives will say, no, 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 I have to understand it better or more. Like when I did my research and gave it to Naranjo, and he said, well, now write a paragraph about what I say for all the subtypes, put it in your book, because I'd given him my book and he wasn't in there because I had things about him in there, but not directly from him. And I said, wait a minute, you want me to publish work you've never published? He goes, oh, I'm not ready yet. I don't know enough about the subtypes. And, I've come to realize that he really didn't, that he wasn't just saying that to me, that in his mind, he didn't have the great archetype for all 27. There were some types that were very confusing, like the smaller 4 or the bigger 5, or in other words, there were still a lot of things that were in the domain of stereotypes. So he really didn't want to, but he later did go on to write a subtype book, but not in 1996. He said, no, I haven't thought about that in, almost 20 years. And I think he was telling the truth. But it's better with a 5 to remind them that their ability to, and they make great analysts, by the way, because they have all the data and they can retrieve it. But being on the other end, they don't like. And in my experience, they stay as long as they're still getting new information. And if it starts to be something they know, the dis-ease comes up and you can't work with them the way you work with the other types. And that's a whole nother thing that I can go into in a course, but it's just reminding them to share what they know, which they're reluctant to do. But if you say, well, 99% more than the person who's asking you the question, and just say you're not certain, but based on what you've learned, and go from there. And that seems to be more meaningful. Spence, is there anything different you do with 5s?
I wouldn't say different. I really focus on their innate ability to observe and to track, and I really speak to them in the form of cause and effect, because trying to explain like this event causes this emotion, which causes this chain reaction, blah blah blah. That's a lot harder to follow than say, this leads to this. Is that what you want it to end up as? And then I bring up the technique of play the tape. And that's a specific technique where you're about to make a decision. And then right before you actually engage in that decision, imagine yourself pressing play and then watch the movie. Do you like the ending? Typically, if you don't like the ending of a movie, you don't want to watch that again. So if you don't like the ending of this movie, then don't do this next action. And 5s are really good at that because they have this ability to just recognize patterns. They track them all day long, so they can really recognize like, oh, if I yell, chances are this is going to get into an argument. I'm going to get in trouble with my boss, right? It's not about the disrespect. It's about this action that occurs. So I really focus on the cause and effect, and I really complement the intelligence and their ability to track, so they can really feel comfortable in recognizing their ability to compartmentalize, their ability to this is actually a huge strength. And there's just a way to think about it.
Yeah, thank you. Whereas if we move into the 6, which is also in the head center, it's all about a desire for certainty and a fear of blame. And the 6 is trying to figure out who's blameworthy. And if they are afraid they're going to be blamed, they also blame others. And they do it unconsciously. It's not like they're thinking, oh, he did it. It's because they're feeling like they might be blamed. It's a knee-jerk reaction. Like that's another way to see the difference between 8 and 6. 8s just tell the person directly, you're an idiot. Whereas the 6 might do that if they're posturing. But otherwise, it's all about that. So you don't tell the 6, here are ways to feel more secure. Instead, you just say, well, what were you feeling insecure about? And you realize that everybody's insecure. It's just they may not know it. And what would happen if you didn't blame? I always say what would happen because that's part of the inquiry process. But people don't realize how sixes are waiting to be, in a way, blamed for something. And that's why they can identify with type 1 too, because they feel made wrong. And then the counterphobic six is going to test you more and push. And they often have the 8 and the Tritype, and or they're the sexual instinct. But if you build rapport with them, it's a whole different story. But they'll test you and you just go, all right, that was fun. Now let's go on to this, or what are the pros and cons? Another way I work with people that have 6 and the Tritype is, what would you want to say if you could? What do you say? And what's the outcome when you do? And if they're really contradictory, you just say, what are the pros and cons of anything you want to ask them? I also take clients on the internet, especially kids and teens, because if you teach them at the level they know or they can relate to, it's much better. Go, oh, show me the game you like now. What do you like about that game? And they'll play it for you and show you. And then you've got all this material and people are flabbergasted. Wait, you take them to play games? I go, no. It's not unlike when you'd have them play a board game in the office to see, do they cheat and why do they cheat? And why do they seek the advantage? And how do they handle defeat? And how do they handle victory? It's not unlike that. But if they're young, then I'm showing them animal friends and asking them what they think about the animals. If they're older, then I'm showing them, debates with what's going on in the world. And then the older they are, depending on their age and their parent, I take them to look at what different leaders say about an issue and how it'll show up in humor or on Saturday Night Live. I take them all different ways, especially in 8, because they will relate more and expand it if you're not telling them, well, you should open your mind. You shouldn't be so definite. I just say, well, every decision needs an emotional aspect. Nah, we don't need emotions. Well, people make a whole lot of decisions based on emotions. What do you think emotions are? And when kids are really young, I have them draw circles and show me the different faces of someone happy, someone sad. And this is even on the internet. I did it in person, of course, when I had a outside office, but it can all be accomplished the way we all have to do it now because of COVID. And they'll do it. And you can do all kinds of things with what's available to us now. But how do you work with 6s? They're the most difficult and contradictory type to work with. And they're the most inclined to be in therapy, even more than the 4. And they are just waiting for you to say something that you didn't say or you said differently. So how do you work with them?
Well, I first remind myself that 6s are amazing mental chess players. They are, before they make a move, they're thinking about the next 10 moves that can occur. They're very, very future oriented, and they tend to be very frustrated by their anxiety because they often feel alone and feel like no one else thinks this way. So I first off remind them, first off, you are not alone. There are tons of 6s in the world. Welcome. I have it in my Tritype, by the way. Like that whole thing. I really normalize it. And then I remind them the whole purpose of anxiety. Anxiety's purpose is to prepare, to let you know that something important or something dangerous, whatever the case may be, is coming. So you're doing your job. You're doing a great job. In fact, that little worker inside of you that's in control of anxiety, they're doing an amazing job. Like maybe they can, take a couple minutes off, that kind of thing, right? It's not that there's something wrong or something broken. It's just that you're really, really good at this preparing thing. And so thinking 10 steps ahead and trying to, well, what if this happens? Because the big thing with 6s, it depends. So instead of coming straight at them with a general technique that will work, I will ask them, what are you trying to prevent? Or what are you trying to protect? Right? For 6s, it's really big on they're trying to ensure something they want to happen does, or they're trying to ensure something they don't want to happen doesn't. Every action creates this chain reaction of something like that, and they've thought way ahead. And so I kind of bring them back to that. And I kind of go, downward arrow with them as well, and reminding them, yeah, there's a purpose to what you're doing. Is there another way that maybe would feel less stressful, things like that? Keep in mind, their head's going to be going round and round. And then, of course, I help them come up with cognitive strategies to break cycles that they get stuck in their head about.
That cingulate gyrus. And you can tell them, the brain lies. All you have to do is have a solution. Even if it's the wrong solution, it's a new solution, and the brain calms down. But then, of course, it immediately goes, but what if this happens?
Yeah.
I've even had people. Yeah, what if they're wrong? Yeah, what if they're wrong? And that's exactly, I've had 6s where they learn to see their anxiety, give it a percentage, all the different strategies for working with 6. And then when they don't have anxiety, they'll say, there's only one problem, Katherine. I said, what's that? This was many years ago. And they said, yeah, but when I don't have anxiety, it doesn't feel normal. And I'm afraid that there might be something that I would have been alerted to had I had anxiety. And so I don't know something that maybe I should be considering. So therefore something can go wrong. And then that's why you just say, well, then let your brain do that. Just use it to your advantage.
Yeah. One of my favorite 6 jokes is worrying works. 99% of the things we worry about doesn't happen. So I will,
but it could happen.
Yeah, but it could happen. And so I'm playful with them because 6s are very quick. They have really great senses of humor. So they really pick up on the playfulness. So I really just normalize, because you're doing your job. I mean, it's because of 6s that we're not all just dead. It's like 6s are the reason that we have teams for this, and we thought of that, so they're very important. So I just really remind them that they're not just this thing that can't turn off. It's no, it's we need you, right? If it was run by 8s, we would all just be doing things because it felt right in the moment, and then there would just be, I don't even want to know. So we tend to just take full charge, so yeah.
In the interest of time, the 7s are focused on options and possibilities and ways to enjoy doing tedious things. But their trigger, what throws them off, is limitation. And limitations imposed by others, because they want to be the one that decides where they do and don't put their time and for how long. And so they avoid therapy or coaching like a plague. Unless there's a particular issue, they're not going to show up. It might be a spouse that's bringing them in, or a job scenario. And once you tell the 7 right up front that they're going to not have to go into all their feelings and feel pain, that you will take them to the issue, touch on it, immediately take them out. And if you do that and keep your word, the 7 continues coming, because their terror is they're going to be smothered by a wet blanket of pain that they can't, and they're underwater and they can't get it off, and they feel like they're drowning. So they avoid it like the plague. But it's extraordinary if you tell them right up front, that's not the way I work. We'll touch on it, but I promise you, it'll be for a nanosecond, just to tag it, then we're right out. And then they relax. And I go slowly with 7s too. They can't take what a 4 can take. But when they do, it's extraordinary. What's your experience with 7s?
Yeah, I love how you said that. With 7s, I really just try to make it feel casual. We're here for a purpose, and you're dead on. I have yet to have an individual client that has 7 in the Tritype. It's always as a partner in a couple. And it's usually the partner that called me, not them. So I really try to create this like safety where it's like, look, we're here to make things better, right? We're here to improve. And also, it just so happens my style, I'm something known as a positive therapist. So my whole approach is like, I'm here to remind everybody what we're here fighting for, like what we're trying to accomplish. So yes, we're going to get into the feelings. Yes, we're going to do this. Yes, we're going to do that. But we're not going to stay there. We're going to focus on, okay, so that's what happens. How do we get here? And I also talk about how they met and blah, 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 and all that kind of stuff. So I really try to keep it light and keep it casual while also being like, look, I'm not going to lie to you. We're going to go there, but we're not going to stay there.
And get to the positive as quickly as
Yes,
possible.
right away.
And then they can handle
Yeah,
anything.
I cracked the most with sevens
Yeah,
during
yeah.
therapy.
More than sixes?
I guess that's true. Sixes and sevens by far the most. Yeah.
And eights. But
Yeah.
we're in transitioning to eights, it's all about autonomy. I'm my own boss. I decide what I do or don't do and when. I choose if I'm going to do that. You can't tell me what to do. And a lot of types will say, you're not the boss of me, but for an eight, you really aren't, no matter how old you are and how young the eight is.
Or if you're their boss.
Yeah, or you're their boss. Like when I was promoted at 20, when they promoted me, they thought I was older, as I've mentioned many times, but they said, okay, we're promoting you. You get everything done. You take charge. That's great. But we want you to take these management training classes to become more professional. I go, what is this? Is this a compliment or an insult or criticism? They said, both. People have to want to follow you. So the eight's autonomy can come off as off-putting, and people can think eight's uncooperative. So helping the eight see that, yeah, you're going to protect people in a difficult situation, but they don't know that. They just know what they're projecting onto your behavior, the way Spencer's teacher did, or the way my teacher did. And the fear underneath it, what they're avoiding is powerlessness. A lot is taught about the eight vulnerable and the eight this, but that's not eight saying that. We've learned to say that word, vulnerable, because the Enneagram talks about vulnerable. But for the eight is, I don't want to be weak and pathetic or powerless and at the mercy of someone that is unjust. So helping them understand that they're going to govern what happens, and that, anytime they don't like something, I know they're going to tell me, and they immediately like that. I think it's pretty clear. Is there anything based on the autonomy of the powerless that you want to say before we go on to 9?
The only thing I really add is I just remind them that the same techniques they use that defend them from pain, that defend them from harm and protect them, can also be the very thing that's preventing them from letting in warmth, letting in love, letting in the connection that they're actually seeking in the first place. So instead of saying like, don't do this, don't do that, because again, that goes over really well. I just say like, hey, it sounds like you have an awesome strategy for this and this and this. So good job. Do you also find though that also kind of works the other way too? So that they come to the conclusion, oh, dang, yeah, there are elements of my technique that don't work to my advantage as well. And I'm in control of that, so I should do something different.
Yeah, and then, and the other thing is helping eights understand that their impulse is to step in and take charge when they might have no business doing so, and that it's better to wait just a few seconds to see how things are going to unfold before they step in. Whereas the 9's going to do the opposite. They're not going to step in because their desire is peaceful relating, because they're so empathetic that, and in terms of empathy, I mean in the true sense of the word, meaning you feel what other people feel. It's really the gut types. The heart types are sympathetic and the head types are understanding. And all of us are are empathetic, but is it a good empathy? Do we like it, or are they using their empathy to get around us or to manipulate us in some way? And people in general, I'm saying. But in the case of the 9, they so feel disharmony that it's uncomfortable in their body. So they'll say, no, 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 I don't care about that. You know, what you want matters. But what they don't realize is, in their own way, like little tendrils, they're trying to govern a situation that they're completely unaware of. So it's helping them understand that it's better to address a problem, like that old saying, a stitch in time saves 9. Well, in the case of a 9, it's true. Because if they just dealt with something a little earlier, it wouldn't be torn, completely torn. They could have mended it, because in my experience, 9s take it and they take it and they take it, and then they're gone, but you don't know they're gone. They just don't respond as often, and they just don't call you back. They'll talk to you when you call, but they're already gone, and they've never given the people that they care about a chance to know their true feelings in many ways, or as friends. They fade away. So it's helping them to find little ways to deal with conflict, little tiny, tiny ways, and then expanding that so that they're not going against their defense strategy that goes, no, 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 I can't take the emotional turmoil within my body, because they're very physically aware of it. And they're also a type that doesn't work between sessions. I have to really encourage 9s to make a word cloud or a collage to discover what they're actually feeling. Because each time we're in a coaching session, they have a new insight that was really the insight from the last six sessions, because the defense strategy comes in and can't have a problem. Oh, things have been really good. Have they? And yeah, no problems. I don't have problems. I said, well, but why did you say this or that? And of course, I remember from 10 years ago, even if I have clients, and they'll say, oh, yeah, that's right. Well, I just don't think about those. And I said, but your body does. There's a dynamic going on, and just helping them understand just a little sensation they have in their body. And they think they're non-judgmental, but actually they're the top of the judging triad. So they are thinking nice, not nice, nice, not nice, about every single person they meet and every incident. In fact, they'll say, you know, that person was really a nice person. Well, that person was really, yeah, I don't trust that person. In fact, Spencer's dad is a 9, and I would always say, hey, what do you think about this person? And they're really good at looking at the other person. But if I would say, well, what do you feel about that? Nothing. And the 9 has to learn how to go and assess what they're feeling. How do you work with them, Spence?
Well, I first honor their need to present as a stable, strong, dependent force. Nines want to present as like a rock you can lean on that has no cracks in it, is never thrown, is never disturbed.
Unflappable.
Unflappable, great word. And there's almost like a shame around anger, where they almost want to pretend that that's not an emotion that they have when they're like the center of the gut type, which is the anger, zone.
Motivated by anger.
Yeah.
Not shame, not fear.
Right. So I often refer to 9 as like the sleeping bear, because like my mom says, they'll take, and out of nowhere, well, it feels like nowhere to you, but not to the 9. The 9 will wake up and be like, that's it. And then that can be like, whoa, I thought you were this chill person. And then instantly the 9's like, damn it, see, this is why I can't get angry, because blah, blah, blah. So I often remind the 9 that actually in the irony, in the attempt to avoid conflict, it actually creates conflict, because instead of saying a little thing every 2 times it happens, you waited for the 20th time when it was so big that you woke up as a bear. And so understanding that in your attempt to not be an issue or not create a problem, it actually did that for you. So, and then I really focus on checking in with the body and physical self-soothing, because nines are very, very like physically oriented. So self-care
And comforts is the most important
comforts,
thing to know.
exactly. Yeah, totally. So yeah.
And to use the right comforts, and depending on all these types, we need to know the tritype, we need to know the
Yeah.
instinctual stacking
Mm-hmm.
to pinpoint what'll work. But the most important thing is, of course, to inquire in a way that doesn't feel invasive, doesn't feel like too threatening, following where the person's going with whatever skills you have. And if you don't have a lot of coaching or therapeutic skills, then it's a matter of inquiry. And you just have to be so careful how you inquire with each type, because when that comes up, and each type can do it in their own way, you have to say, oh, looks like I approached that the wrong way. If I'd approached it in the right way, how might I have done it?
Mm-hmm.
And you might have a better chance with them. Does anyone have a question? And if not, I'll go with the questions that were sent in. So one of the most common questions is, what do I do with an 8 that's in denial? Fair question. You have to find out what their denial is. Say, what is it I don't know or understand? And a lot of times people will approach with, I need to, like one question or several questions in different ways were around, how do I tell an 8 they need to back off? You don't ever tell an 8 to back off. And the books that say stand up to them and get in their face, the worst thing you could ever do to an 8.
Those are the same
Because
books that tell you to
the
run.
8 is going to go, or they're going to, well, you don't really go up against anybody that's in adrenaline. But in the case of an 8, that's what you could do if you have a really intimate relationship, you're married to an 8 and you know the dynamics between you. But in general, especially at work, that's what a lot of people thought. I go, oh, no, you don't. Because the 8 then just is going to bring out that hammer and not going to talk to you and tell you how you're an idiot in their language. And instead, you need to approach the 8 with, wow, you grew up in a different time, because there are questions about millennials than I did, or, different family structure. What do I need to do for you to consider what's important to me? And the 8 really does want to be there for you, but you can't say the 8 is or isn't anything. And that's counterintuitive, because we naturally want to say you did this or you did that to everybody, no matter what your type is. But with an 8, it's just like, yeah, can't talk to you about anything. And it's inside the 8's going, or in a way, it's like talk to the hand. But what the 8 is really doing is putting that hand towards themselves and becoming mute, even if they make a joke or try to throw it off. So millennials have a problem in general because they grew up in an age where everything was available to them. They did not need, in their mind, mentors, because you could go on the internet and find out whatever you wanted. But the problem is they don't know how to discern when information is accurate. Or they might say something like, well, I've done my research and I know this about type 3 or type 6 or whatever the type is. And I said, well, what research did you do? And they'll read it to me or tell me. And I said, well, yeah, but that is a particular perspective that's just been copied by different authors. So even though you might have found it in 10 books, you don't know that it was a mistake to begin with or an incomplete dissemination. So what you want to do is find a different way of saying it and see if it rings true for you with the people that you know of that type, or ask them, is this true? I've read this about type 8. Do you feel this way? But if the 8 doesn't know they're an 8, then the only thing you could do is say, I know I'm getting on your nerves. I know I'm saying things that you don't want to hear. All I want to do is give you a chance to understand something so you won't be in a difficult situation. You may not want that, but is there anything you can tell me that would be a better way to approach you? And the 8 will generally, like Spencer said, they're honest, they'll generally tell you. And the biggest thing I get is people that are parents of what they believe is an 8. And it's just the strong willed, resistant nature. And I kind of addressed that at the beginning. So, is there something different you would say, Spence?
Um, no, I mean, I think that that's a really good way of putting it. I a lot of times, I mean, it depends which part you're referring to. If I'm talking to someone who, thinks they're referring to someone else as an 8, I obviously double check as to why they think they're an 8. It's just like,
Thank you. Very good. Like, what
yeah,
is it that made you decide this
right.
person was an 8? Who are they protecting?
Right. Because a lot of times if they're angry, if they're loud, and if they don't have an issue with confrontation, boom, 8. Right. And that's part of that, mislabeling thing that 8s run into all the time. And then other people get, termed that. But when working with an 8, I'm just really authentic and I'm just like, look, I'm going to ask you questions because remember, I chose this profession for a reason. I care about people. I want to help. But just because I ask you something doesn't mean you have to answer. So keep in mind, obviously, I hope you answer because the more I know, the more I can be of service and be helpful. But you don't have to. And if you want, you can pay me to sit here in silence the whole time. Is that how you want to spend your money? Right?
Yeah.
So I'm frank with them and I'm pretty playful. So yes, I am playful with 8s as well. I just kind of remind them like, why are we here? Like,
Yeah.
what do you want to get here, but not talk about the deep stuff? Okay. So then they're kind of like, okay, yeah, I guess I'm not really, setting myself up for success here, and then kind of go from there. It looks like we have a hand raise.
So hi, I was wondering how to approach an 8, which is a sexual subtype that is in a couple with a 9 that is really weak with his health and that is bullied by his own family. How can this 8 back off to protect even herself? Because how the way she protects her partner that is a 9 that is weak can also affect her, like the whole family of the 9 can bully that person too. So how to approach that situation? And by the way, the types I confirmed, like the 2 person I really identify as their types, and they're both sexual types.
Well, is this because the 8 puts off the family members of the 9 and causes estrangement? Like, what is, because it's good to protect someone, but where's the problem? I want to make sure I understand.
No, in fact, it's the family members of the 9 that really prevent the couple to see each other because of COVID. And they would set any reason to prevent them to see each other because they don't like the 8 partner, of course.
Yeah.
And I think that the members of the family of this 9 person, maybe the mother is a 1 and the big sister is a 3. So they would really throw the little 8 under the bus if needed. And they have really high standards for things that are really not accurate as a human being.
So as to how they're taking care of the 9, do you mean? How the 8 is taking care of the 9? They have high standards?
No, I was saying the mother of the 9 is a 1, and they have really high standards, but they're also super abusive. It's a toxic household.
Sorry,
when something's toxic, that's a whole nother story. Spencer, go ahead.
I was going to ask, is the issue that you're talking about that the 8 partner becomes protective of the 9 partner, and then that creates conflict with the 9's family?
I worry about the 8 person because it's my daughter and I really don't want her to get involved too young into something that is bigger than her. And I think she's going to be eaten alive if she stays in that situation. But she really wants to protect her 9 partner, even against his family. And the way she protects him is really emotionally, is by showing up, being there. She says nothing against the family, and she takes everything they throw at her, even if it's wrong, even if they go very far, like in her back, but like even in front of her when she saw them. They were really aggressive and hostile for no reason. It was the first time they saw each other.
Yeah, it's the hallmark of a sexual 8, by the way, to stay and sacrifice themselves for the person they love that's vulnerable. And it's really, you can't tell the 8 to leave. All you can do is bear witness to what the 8 is going through. But I would be really surprised if the 8 ever left. Sexual 8s fuse. And if it's hard on the parents or the family or the kids, the 8 stops telling the truth. So you have to decide if you want the 8 to be honest with you or to start not telling you what's going on.
I really had this issue recently. Like we were starting going to war because she started lying to me, and I'm a 6, so of course, if you lie to me,
you're gonna, yeah. And so don't put her in a position where she has to lie. And as hard as it is, just know that you're doing the most for her, and she'll make more informed decisions and be able to take better action once she knows she doesn't have to lie and she has a true confidant. But most sexual 8s protect their friends, their family, their parents, and their children. It's just the nature of the sexual 8 that they become, in a way, one with the person that they've chosen, and they don't want to hurt anybody, and someone's going to be hurt. So they go with the weakest person. And it's really hard to understand, even if you're another 8. It's like, what? But it's hardwired within the 8 to protect the weak, the downtrodden, the misrepresented, the vulnerable, the one who can't act on their own behalf. But since you're the mom, it's totally understandable. But don't lose the confidence with her. Keep that open, and it'll hurt you that she's being hurt. But it's eventually she'll know what to do and how to do it because you've been there.
Yeah. And I was surprised to not be the weakest person because I have health issues too. So this, I'm really not used to be the put second after another person that is completely new. And like at first, I just try to gather information. Then I try to confront the guy because I think he's manipulative, by the way. And I can feel it, I can smell it, like from afar.
6s are really good at feeling that and smelling that.
So I know that. I know
but it won't matter. But if you hang in there, the 8 will eventually see that, or the 8 may already know that, but already be emotionally committed in a way. But when something starts to not resonate, the 8 will unwind from that devotion. They may still remain devoted, but may move away from a difficult situation or finally break up with someone, because they will. It could take a long time if they think the other person's really vulnerable. They feel like, well, hey, if they won't hang in there with the person, nobody will. So they stay and fight on the behalf. And it's something people don't really understand about it. It's like, wait a minute, you're a tough person. Why are you suddenly weak about this? But it'll always be with the partner.
Yeah, and she's not afraid to break up. It's me that is afraid for her to suffer.
Oh, yeah, okay, very good.
She can handle the breakup. I'm sure about it.
Do you know your Tritype?
Sorry?
Do you know your Tritype?
Not sure.
Yeah, it'll give you more insight. And if you figure out her Tritype, And, you know, you can find, I have the test where I even have the little alerts that even if you don't test as a 6, they're
I've
particular
seen it.
pattern.
I think she has 5 and 3.
5 and 2?
5 and 3. 3.
8, 5, and 3 is a very no-nonsense person.
INTJ.
That's really rare for an 8 to be an INTJ. They're usually an ENTJ. So she might have 6 in there rather than 5. It's worth checking out because they're very strong in a different way. And you can, I have little mini descriptions on my websites where the test is and my regular katherinefauvre.com on the Tritypes. But it's very easy to think someone's a 5 when they're actually an introverted 6.
Yeah. And also because she has also self-preservation, I think, in her subtypes, where I don't have it at all. So I can associate self-preservation with 5, which may not. But she's really logical, like thinking, and she really organizes her time well. Honestly.
That's good. And Spence, is there anything more you would say before we close? About the sexual 8 staying in a relationship long after they should have?
Well, as someone who's done that multiple times, it's one of those things where we dig our heels in and we've decided that's what we're going to do. And this is an opportunity to show your daughter that even if it's not something you agree with because you want to protect her, and I get it. You're remember I was saying before, 6s, they want to prevent, right? They want to ensure something is not going to happen that they don't, or they do want to happen that does. So you want to take her away from it. That makes complete sense. And it's a very loving thing that you're doing. But what the 8 wants to know more than anything is that you'll back her, regardless of her choices, as long as you recognize where her heart is. So honoring her heart and being like, look, I get why you're doing this. I really respect you for that. And honestly, the last thing I ever want would to tell you to do something that is not in your soul. I just want the best things for you, and I get concerned that it will result in hurting you. But if this is what you want to do, I'll back you up. And if you ever want to bounce ideas off of me, I'm here for you. And then
I'm there no matter what.
Yeah, I'm there.
But I'm still your mom.
Yeah.
But I'm still your mom, and I'm going to give you my opinion, but you don't have to do what I say.
Ding, ding, ding. Set up the parameters. So then she understands, even if she does get that resistance, it's mom being mom, right? You know, and then she can still be real with you, knowing that you're allowed to disagree, because she doesn't want to hurt you either. She wants to protect you too. And that's why the time when 8s choose to not be honest is actually a protective measure, because it's like, look, I don't want to hurt you, mom. So I'm just going to not give you all the information to protect you.
And then you see right through it.
Yeah.
You know, it's so important to pull the mom card in a positive way. Even Spence, you know, as an 8, he came to me when he was we got along really well, but he came to me when he was about 22, I think it was. And he goes, Mom, we need to have a conversation. I said, sure. And he said, you know, I'm a male, right? You are. And he goes, I'm an 8. You are indeed. So I'm the alpha 8 now. And I said, you are, but I'm still your mom. I'm still going to tell you what I think, but you don't have to do any of it. And then that just, oh, okay. Because he is an alpha 8, but I'm still the mother of the alpha 8. Spencer, you should answer instead of me saying, but I feel like that was critical to pull the mom card in a very constructive way.
Yes. Being reminded that what I was hearing that was in direct conflict with what I thought was a caring technique. Hey, I'm being your mom. Let me be your mom. You don't have to do what I say, but you still got to like hear me, and then you make your choice. Just know I'm not just pulling stuff out of my ass, just saying random things, right? Like, I'm saying it for a reason. I want to protect you. I want this. I want that. But I do trust you. I know I raised a great person, and I know where your heart is. I just don't, it's always going to hurt me to see you get hurt, and I just don't want that. And that's all I'm doing, right? So as long as you'll hear me, you can do whatever you need to do, and I'll always hear you, and we're allowed to disagree. I will still love you regardless. and I'll support you regardless. And
Even if it hurts you, you will support her.
And oddly enough, that has had me shift and become closer with people 9 out of 10 times, because then I can be safe and then I can be my authentic self. And then I might say things that I wouldn't have otherwise because I don't think you're ready to just disagree with me and fight me over this. And then because I've said that, I've now heard myself say it, and then my mind starts to change. But if I see you as opposition, all right, you love me? Cool. Right? And then I'm ready for battle. I'm not ready to listen. I'm listening just long enough so I know what to say in response, not listening to understand where you're coming from. It's a very different style of listening.
Oh, but we always had a collaborative relationship, like, and it's the first time we fight.
I believe it.
Yeah.
I believe it happens a lot, actually.
He spilled my secrets to that person, so I was like completely mad, and I just wanted to go away and like even move out, you know, because it was too painful to worry that much for her. Like I couldn't even sleep at night. And
no, I understand that, and a lot of people pull away when the 8's in a scenario like that, or anyone is in a scenario like that, and they think they need to tell the person what to do, but it never plays out right. Even if the person leaves, there's resentment.
Yeah.
So it's more building up the person so they make the decision in a way for themselves. But you've been there, so they're, as Spencer mentioned, so they, as they're saying something out loud, the sexual 8 and other types will begin to realize, wait, yeah, I don't like that. And when you want to say something, don't say, but this person's manipulating you. It's 6s are good at saying, but doesn't it bother you when that happens? I know, and it probably is just me. I'm sorry. I've got to say it, but just ignore me. Even doing that, like just ignore me, still gives the percolation machine going. And then if the sexual 8 starts noticing things that don't line up in a way that you've mentioned, but it hasn't been about you, in other words, your sadness on seeing her suffer or whatever, then it gets in. And then, as I said, it shortens the time span of this self-sacrifice. But remember, the sexual 8, if you know anything about 8, wants autonomy. Sexual wants union, fusion. So the sexual 8 surrenders their power and control to the person they have chosen. So in a way, they have to kind of take it back, but they have to have a reason to, because they have become one with the person. It's kind of a weird combination that happens with sexual 8s. But she'll protect you just as much, and if not more so, because she's known you longer. But when it comes to multiple loved ones, it makes the 8 just go crazy, because there has to be a hierarchy. And as much as it hurts them, it has to go to the partner or the weaker person. It can devastate the 8, but because we're hardwired that way as 8s. So yeah, great comment and question. Thank you so much for asking it. And thank you all for being here. And we'll see you again in the future. Thank you.